So again, good morning and welcome to the second day of the Principles of Music Composing conference. It is my pleasure to introduce our online presenter and actually an old friend, Arthur Kaptainis, with his paper, Pomp in Canadian Circumstance, Ernest Macmillan's Cortège Académique. I won't introduce anyone more than the name and the title of the presentation, so to save time. Please, Arthur, go ahead.
Thank you, Milos. Okay, well, greetings from Canada, everyone. Good morning. My talk today is concerned less with an analysis of the composition referred to in the title than with the dynamics of national identity and how national identity intersects with the standard international repertoire. I might as well confess straight away that among my many retrograde tendencies is a belief in the viability of the canon, liberally defined, and a companion belief that contemporary attempts to discredit the concept are misguided. The existence of a canon, and a canon particular to the organ world, is central to my thesis. In short, there are signs that Cortège Académique, a 5-minute organ piece written in 1953 by Sir Ernest Macmillan, has become an international commodity. This has interesting implications for Canadians who rarely hear their music performed beyond their own borders. And could we have the next slide, please? If I have a hidden agenda, it might be to do what little I can to bolster the reputation of Sir Ernest, who died 50 years ago and remains the most widely accomplished of all Canadian musicians, despite the greater international renown of Glenn Gould and Claude Vivier. But let me say a few words about national identity in Canada, a subject that could easily provide content on its own for a 3-day conference. Canada, with a population of 39 million, is probably the most ethnically diverse country in the world. 23% of Canadian citizens and permanent residents in 2021 were immigrants. The percentage was about the same in 1921. Of course, a high proportion of the remaining 77% are children or grandchildren of immigrants, especially from Europe and Asia. There's no such thing as a typical Canadian, but I stand before you as a characteristic one. My father's parents came from Lithuania and my mother's parents came from Scotland. And I grew up not knowing which heritage to privilege. There exist old stock Canadians descended from 19th century and 18th century settlers, particularly in Quebec. And of course, there are 1.8 million people who identify as Indigenous. Next slide, please. But when Justin Trudeau told the New York Times in 2015 that there's no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, he was articulating a defensible point of view. Do we have that quotation? Yes. If there is no longer a core Canadian identity, this is not to say there was not a dominant group of Canadians of British descent 100 years ago who dictated the economic, social, cultural, and political character of the country. Bear in mind that Canada is governed by a House of Commons, a Senate meant to replicate the House of Lords, a Governor General representing the monarchy, and ultimately by King Charles, who is head of state. It wasn't until 1980 that O Canada superseded God Save the King as the national anthem. And the next slide, please. It was very much into a transplanted British society that Ernest Macmillan was born in 1893 in Mimico, a suburb of Toronto. His father, Alexander, was a Scottish-born Presbyterian minister and hymnologist who edited the Canadian Presbyterian and United Church hymn books. Ernest was an organ prodigy who made his first public appearance at age 10, and at age 15 was appointed organist choir master of Knox Presbyterian Church. Even before this, he took music classes in Edinburgh, where his father was on a sabbatical. He returned to Britain at age 17 to complete his fellowship in the Royal College of Organists and his Bachelor of Music at Oxford. These early experiences left his speech with an English-Scottish lilt that the novelist Robertson Davies regarded as authentically Canadian and in no way an affectation. Back home, Ernest studied history at the University of Toronto, where there was no degree program in music. In view of this shortcoming, he traveled to France in 1914 as a prospective student at the Paris Conservatoire, then spent the summer in Bayreuth. He was in something of a Wagnerian reverie when the guns of August began to assemble. Proceeding to Nuremberg, he was arrested and sent to Ruhleben, a converted racetrack complex outside Berlin, where he spent the following 4 years as an enemy alien. This experience ended up reinforcing his immersion in British culture, as most of the fellow inmates were British. There was a piano and some other instruments, which made it possible to produce a performance of the Mikado as reconstructed mostly by Ernest from memory. And I'll say parenthetically, Ernest Macmillan had the gift. He had a great musical memory. He had a perfect ear. He had the basis of a great musical career. Anyway, the Mikado was his first taste of conducting, a discipline in which he had no formal training. His most extraordinary exploit in captivity, however, was to write his Oxford doctoral composition thesis with only occasional access to the piano. This was a 40-minute setting for orchestra and chorus of Algernon Charles Swinburne's overtly patriotic poem, England, an Ode. This looks like prima facie evidence of undiminished devotion to the motherland, but of course, Ernest was motivated to give the Oxford examiners what they wanted to hear. Back in Canada in 1919, Ernest became organist and choirmaster of Timothy Eaton Memorial Church, a position that gave him a platform to work as an organ recitalist and conductor. He also began a career as a teacher and educator at what would become the Royal Conservatory of Music. Named principal in 1926 and simultaneously dean of the fledgling University of Toronto Faculty of Music, Ernest developed an examination system that survives to this day. He launched an opera program and overhauled the ear training and sight singing textbooks. Next panel, please. Quite remarkably, he also acquired an interest in folk music, inspired by the research of the ethnomusicologist Marius Barbeau, whom he joined on an expedition in 1927 to the Nass River area of British Columbia, recording and transcribing the songs of the elders. Salvage ethnography, as it was called, is no longer considered an honorable activity, and the notion that the songs recorded would otherwise be lost is disputed. But Ernest reports in his introduction to this publication that even in his day when he was doing the research, interest in music among the younger members of the indigenous communities was fading. I am prepared to believe him. In any case, Ernest's Canadian consciousness was clearly broadening. Next panel, please. In a 1925 review of Barbeau's earlier work, he wrote, "We have been too much concerned with teaching new arrivals our own ways and too little in discovering the contributions they are making to our own national life. If we have been negligent in the case of immigrants, what can we say of the people in whose eyes we are mere usurpers?" Of course, referring to the indigenous community. A remarkably contemporary approach to the question of indigenous culture. Years later, Sir Ernest, who was indeed then a Sir, would identify, the next panel, please. He would identify, quote, two main sources of material which we may consider uniquely Canadian: Indian music indigenous to the soil but alien to the white race, and the great literature of French-Canadian folk song, most of it of European origin, but so long established in Canada that it has developed a distinctive flavor unlike that of European French music. A quotation that is as remarkable for what it omits as what it includes. In 1931, he became conductor of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, tremendous responsibility. that took a good deal of his time, obviously. And by 1942, he had added the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir to his portfolio. At this point, it becomes hard to synopsize his activities. Conductor, teacher, broadcaster, administrator, president of the copyright organization KPAC, co-founder of the Canadian Music Centre. He was truly the dominant musician of English Canada, and not at all an arrogant or austere figure. His appearances as Santa Claus at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra Christmas concerts were renowned. In view of his many accomplishments, Macmillan was knighted in 1935 during a brief revival of the practice under the Conservative government of R.B. Bennett. Giving knighthoods to Canadians was discontinued in 1919 and then revived. Only 42, Ernest was the first citizen of the Commonwealths outside of Britain to be knighted for service to music. And while opinion at the time differed on the propriety of the revival of knighthoods in Canada, the title certainly enhanced the prestige of music as a profession while reaffirming Sir Ernest's credentials as a Canadian of British heritage. Next panel, please. Active as he was, by the middle of the century, Ernest was no longer productive as a composer, with the remarkable exception of Cortège Académique, his only composition for organ, written on relatively short notice for the centennial celebrations of University College. This great Victorian pile is the true founding college of the University of Toronto, despite the common equation of its origin with the 1827 Royal Charter granted to King's College. The premiere was given at what was billed as a centenary service on Sunday, October 18th. The composer was at the Cassavant Instrument of Convocation Hall, a space he knew well, having led the St. Matthew Passion there many times. Sir Ernest, as I mentioned, had been both principal of the Royal Conservatory and dean of the Faculty of Music, institutions that maintain an uneasy coexistence and indeed today overlap in many ways. How to reconcile them resulted in a disagreement with the university administration in 1952 that made headlines in Toronto and resulted in Macmillan's resignation. It would be a poor use of time to recount the details, but when Sir Ernest was approached about contributing to the centennial celebration, he declined at first. When the university raised the ante to include an honorary degree, which was quite appropriate as a recognition of his service and as an appeasement, this provided the necessary incentive. What he produced was as forthrightly and joyously as any work, forthrightly and joyously British, as any work could be. It is cast in a straightforward ABA form. We only see the first two pages here. The A part, a jaunty march with dotted rhythms. The B part, a long line tune of noble and imperial overtones. It clearly follows the model established by Edward Elgar in his Pomp and Circumstance marches, written in the early 20th century and emulated by William Walton in Crown Imperial, the great march written for the 1937 coronation of George VI. Whether Walton's repeat performance, Orb and Scepter, for the coronation, more recent coronation of Elizabeth II on June 2nd, 1953, whether this added any impetus is an open question. Now the time has come at last to hear the music. A 1984 recording by Andrew Davis, now Sir Andrew Davis, did much to disseminate the piece, but I have chosen a more recent performance, evidently given in casual circumstances by Roger Sayer, the organist of the Venerable Temple Church in London. That'll be the next slide, and we can, it is a YouTube video. Do we have sound? Now, was that audible? I'm afraid I heard nothing. Have we lost audio?
Uh, we heard it perfectly.
Oh, really? Okay, I got the
Yeah, no problem.
John Cage version, the 4 minutes and 33.
Yeah,
Oh,
every note was audible.
okay, and I'm glad that you could hear it because the saucy last two the saucy dissonances before the final tonic chord can be interpreted as raspberries directed to the university authorities who had caused its earnest offense. Now, this is an analysis of those two chords full of dirty notes. So, but I'm not going to pursue that angle any further. Now, this would be Sir Ernest's last significant composition. Why did he compose so little when his gift was so great? The simple answer is that he was so deeply involved in national musical affairs that he had neither the time nor the peace of mind to devote to composition. His son Keith said that his father found it difficult to compose with so much of other people's music in his head. Yet the floodgates suddenly opened with Cortège Académique. Possibly more music of British sentiment and style would have been within Sir Ernest's grasp. But as Canada evolved, he felt less and less entitled to express himself in this idiom. In any case, my aim is not to psychoanalyze Sir Ernest, but to point out that 30 years after its premiere, Cortège Académique is a hit. There are about a dozen individual YouTube performances, most of them by non-Canadians and non-outside of Canada. That might not sound like many, but those videos are here to stay. Now, it should be noted that the organ community is somewhat sui generis, and the organ canon is in many ways a world apart. Bach, Liszt, Mendelssohn, and Messiaen and Franck are established composers who wrote organ music, but organists regard figures like Charles-Marie Widor, Louis Vierne, and Julius Reubke as major composers who require no apology or footnoting. Now, I realize that I'm being rather cavalier in my references to the canon. Canonical should not be used as an exact synonym of popular. The Korngold Violin Concerto, almost 90 years after its premiere, is now heard as often as the Bruch Violin Concerto No. 1 and some other standard concertos. We might nevertheless hesitate to call it canonical. Is frequency of performance the main criterion to be considered? What is the role of the passage of time? These are pressing questions at a time when strenuous efforts are being made to construct a counter canon around composers who have allegedly been unfairly excluded. These are issues for another talk. My central argument this morning is that Cortège Académique, a composition in redoubtably British style by Canada's outstanding national musician, is destined to endure as a token, one might say a relic, of a cultural link that was once part of the very essence of Canada. Thanks to this little masterpiece, and that's what I think it is, Canada's past has a future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Arthur. Now let's hear questions, comments. Hey, George.
Thank you for introducing this piece to me, with which I wasn't familiar before. I'm curious to ask your views on how you understand the canon to have come into existence. What generates the canon in the first place? What sort of processes generate a canon in the first place?
That is a very, very big question, and I'm not sure my opinion would be much use. I am an essentialist. I think that this is a masterpiece, and that exploits the sonorities of the organ to perfection. It's fun, it's jaunty, it's rhythmically alive. all of these criteria, I think, come together in this particular piece. If you're asking about why I think this is canonical, although as I say, I'm being a little reckless in my use of the concept of canonical. It is part of the international organ repertoire, and there are few other pieces that can be Canadian pieces that can be put in that category. There is one by Healy Willan that gets around too. This one is so attractive and so compelling. I don't think I'm answering your question, which is something that would take several hours to articulate fully.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's a very vexed question. So I don't feel like I would be able to answer it either.
But maybe I could throw out a question myself. Is there a piece by Churlionis that is in the international repertoire? Europe, for example, because my familiarity with Lithuanian music has been largely cultivated through my participation in these annual sessions.
It's very hard to say that it is a part of international repertoire. I think it's still rather local.
But still part of the Lithuanian canon.
Yes.
So perhaps canon can be absolutized. There is no such a thing as an absolute canon, but locally for organists, for Lithuanians, for whatever specific group has its own canon. And even that, of course, is relative, but
I guess I would say, sidestepping the question of canonicity for a moment, if a piece that is popular can be considered canonical, it doesn't take. I think about certain nationalities. Well, let me put the case of saber dance. If there's one piece of Armenian music that everybody knows, it is saber dance. And I guess on a much smaller scale, I consider Cortège Académique to be the saber dance of Canada. There aren't many pieces of Canadian pieces that can be heard regularly outside of Canada. Maybe Orion by Claude Vivier is approaching that status. But as far as I'm concerned, Cortège Académique is a very special case. And Roger Sayer, by the way, the performer we saw with his dog, I communicated with him and he said that Andrew Davis's recording in 1984 is what alerted him to the piece. So we're talking about a long time after the premiere in 1953. It was published in 1957 by Novello, but it didn't really gain traction until the Andrew Davis recording made in Roy Thompson Hall in Toronto. It could easily have been forgotten, but it is memorable. That's why it is not forgotten.
Perhaps we could organize a discussion or a conference topic, the relation between popularity, canonicity, and value judgment. Very closely related concepts, certainly overlapping, but very probably not identical. I think we're a bit behind time, so I would like to thank Arthur once again and move on to our next presenter. And the next presenter, Santiago Guerra Fernandez, with Harmonizing Identities, Jewish Composers and the Cultural Fusion of Tango in Interwar Poland's Third Space. It is again an online presentation. So please, Santiago, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, we can hear you very well. So,
all
go
right,
ahead,
thank you.
please.
Thank you for introducing me. Greetings from Canada as well, from British Columbia. So for this presentation, I would like to picture with me the vibrant streets of Warsaw, city far removed from the sultry cadences of the Latin-speaking world. In these cobblestone alleys of the European metropolis, an unexpected muse emerged, the tango. Within the bosom of newfound independence and cultural liberation, Poland found itself enchanted by the intoxicating allure of Argentinian passion. It was a moment when borders blurred, and the whispers of longing and desire were set free through the notes of tango. If you can, yes, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Chronologically, the tango is a turn-of-a-century event. It developed in the second half of the 19th century between Buenos Aires and Montevideo. Originating for the lower classes of both cities, it arose from the fusion of elements from Afro-Argentinian and Afro-Uruguayan cultures, along with influences from Creole locals and various waves of European immigration. This artistic and cultural hybridization has shaped the tango into a significant symbol of identity in the Rio de la Plata region, transcending geographical boundaries and inviting diverse cultures into its transformative embrace. If you can pass the slide, please. Fast forward to a pivotal historical juncture, Poland's interwar period, following its hard-won independence in 1918 after more than a century of partitions by Prussia, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire. In this dynamic time of sweeping social changes and flourishing artistic expression, the tango emerges as a compelling catalyst, injecting fresh vitality and allure into Poland's popular music landscape. But why is this relevant? Our journey serves a dual purpose. First, to dissect the melodies and rhythms that resonated through Polish interwar society. And second, to dive into the intricate interplay of identities, particularly the intriguing question of Jewish influence within this musical phenomenon. Now, before we delve into the musical examples, let's set the stage with theoretical framework, drawing on the insightful ideas of scholars such as Homi K. Baba and Stuart Hall. These writers offer valuable tools to examine the multifaceted dynamics of cultural negotiation, representation, and hybridity within the Polish interwar music scene. If you can please pass the panel. The concept of the third space is a key idea developed by the post-colonial theorist Homi K. Baba in his work, particularly in his influential 1994 book, The Location of Culture. Baba's concept of the third space is a complex and somewhat abstract notion that explores the dynamics of cultural identity, hybridity, and the effects of colonialism and cultural context. In essence, the third space represents an in-between or a liminal space that arises when two cultures or identities interact, especially in the context of colonialism. It is neither the dominant culture, the first space, nor the subordinate culture, the second space, but a space where new forms of identity and culture can emerge through the interplay and negotiation between the two. Baba emphasizes the idea of cultural hybridity in the third space, where cultures mix and influence each other in unexpected ways. It is not a simple blending, but a complex process in which elements of both cultures are transformed and reconfigured. The third space is characterized by ambiguity and contestation, and it is a site of struggle, where dominant and subaltern cultures clash and negotiate their positions. This ambiguity challenges fixed notions of identity and culture. In the third space, individuals and communities negotiate their cultural identities and create new forms of expression that may not conform to traditional or colonial categories. Baba sees the third space as a site of potential resistance and agency, where subaltern groups can assert their agency and challenge oppressive power structures. Please, next panel. Stuart Hall, a prominent cultural theorist, presents a similar perspective on cultural identity, emphasizing its dynamic and socially constructed nature. He rejects the notion of fixed and essential identities, and proposes instead that identities are constantly evolving constructs shaped by various forms of representation. Syncretism, as Hall describes, it's the process by which elements from different cultures are critically appropriated and blended. This mixing goes beyond mere borrowing. It involves a disarticulation of established signs and a rearticulation of their symbolic meanings. This process of deconstruction and reconstruction, it is not passive, It is an active creative endeavor that challenges the dominance of the master codes of dominant culture, including language, images, and symbols. Central to Hall's ideas is the concept of representation itself, where he argues that cultural texts actively influence how individuals perceive themselves and others. Cultural representations, including media, art, and discourse, are not passive reflections of reality, but powerful agents in the construction and shaping of identities. Hall's theory of cultural identity is also closely linked to the notion of cultural politics, in which different groups engage in struggles over meaning and representation, negotiating how they are represented and recognized in society. This perspective acknowledges that individuals often inhabit multiple and intersecting identities, influenced by factors such as race, gender, ethnicity, and social class. Before delving straight into the analysis of concrete musical examples within this theoretical framework, it is essential to provide a brief overview of the history of tango in Poland. Next slide, please. Amidst the aftermath of regaining independence in 1918, Poland experienced a cultural renaissance that reverberated with the melodies of jazz, tango, and cabaret, forming a dynamic wave sweeping across Europe from west to east. The rebirth of the Polish state after 123 years of partitions and conflict not only marks a significant political milestone, but also set the stage for a vibrant cultural movement. Within this renewed sense of freedom, Poland embraced modernity, fostering an ideal environment for innovation. Drawing inspiration from both Eastern and Western influences, the nation began crafting a distinctive musical identity that echoed its global aspirations. The introduction of the genre in Poland can be traced back to 1913, when Victor Jacobi's opera Girls' Market was performed in Warsaw for the first time. Although this performance had limited direct impact, the tango gained momentum in Poland through gramophone records, radio broadcasts, and media coverage. If you can please pass the next panel. As Płaczkiewicz suggests, the trend of tango in Poland originated from the West. However, it is important to note that Warsaw, unlike Paris, Madrid, or Berlin, was not a destination for artistic embassies of Argentinian musicians and singers touring the world. The tango found its way to Poland through gramophone records, newspaper rumors, and radio broadcasts. Poland was simply ready to embrace it, as there had always been a sort of appetite for exotic novelties. If you can please go back to the... yes, thank you. In the interwar period, groups like Jordana significantly contributed to popularizing tango in Poland, adopting Argentinian melodies and even incorporating Spanish songs. This success wasn't limited to Jordana. The Gold Orchestra, led by Henrik and Artur Gold, transitioned to tangos and waltzes in 1925, creating an exotic atmosphere. Meanwhile, Jerzy Petersburski, a prolific Jewish songwriter, enriched the period with a diverse repertoire. Next panel, please. Next, yes. Following panel, yes, thank you. No, the next one, sorry. Yes, thank you. Through active engagement with the tango, a unique Jewish identity took shape within the Polish tango scene. This identity went beyond mere reflecting Argentinian or Polish culture. It represented the Jewish experience in Poland, actively participating in its construction. As a cultural text, tango became a dynamic force influencing how Jewish individuals perceived themselves within the broader Polish context. Next panel, please. In the lead-up to World War II, tenor Janusz Popławski recorded the poignant tango Złociste Chryzantemy, Golden Chrysanthemums, symbolizing the end of an era and the impending war. In an atmosphere of uncertainty, the echoing notes of Złociste Chryzantemy were captured, creating a musical snapshot that would come to symbolize both the end of an era and the impending upheaval of war before Germany invaded on September 1st. The lyrics painted a vivid picture. Golden chrysanthemums, delicately held in a crystal vase, adorned a piano. In this scene, sorrow and grief find solace as tearful reflections are met by hands reaching out to the ethereal blossoms. Amidst the delicate imagery, a haunting question is whispered into the air. Why did you leave? The melancholic melody and heartfelt words linger like a farewell to the carefree days that were fading away. I'd like to play an extract of the recording from the second 42, if that's possible. Yes, this approximately, yeah, that's fine.
Chryzantemy złociste w kryształowym wazonie stoją na fortepianie, kojąc smutek i żal. Poprzez łzy srebrną mgliste do nich wyciągam dłonie, szepcząc wciąż jedno zdanie. Czemuś odeszła w dal. Nic mnie dzisiaj nie cieszy, gdy skończyły się sny. Któż me serce uleczy i z oczu zetrze łzy. Chryzantemy złociste.
So, in his writings of the Jewishness of Polish music, Józef Reis, a prominent Polish musicologist, explores the relationship between racial identity and musical composition in what it could be considered as an exploration of the Polish Rassenkunde, racial pseudoscience, drawing from previous German theories. He contends that racial characteristics manifest in musical expression and influence the creative inclinations of composers. His perspective suggests that distinct musical qualities associated with different ethnicities and nations influence elements such as melody, rhythm, and emotional content. Reis's critique is particularly directed at Jewish composers, highlighting what he perceives as a lack of authenticity in their efforts to create music that he deems Jewish enough. He contends that composers should inherently infuse their compositions with characteristics unique to their ethnic backgrounds. In the case of Jewish composers, Reis implies that their music should unmistakably reflect the distinctive cultural and historical experiences of the Jewish people. Another participant in the discourse of racial issues in music was Zofia Lisa, a young scholar in the 1930s. Despite her later embrace of Marxist-Leninist views, in 1934 she surprisingly spoke favorably of racial science and recognized the potential of anthropological research into the racial aspects of artistic phenomena. Lisa distinguished between the scientific study of human races and racism as a political doctrine aimed at establishing dominance of one race over others. While she acknowledges the potential harm, she sees value in exploring racism within the realm of science. It is worth noting that the term racism had a different connotation at the time, more in line with what we could call now ethnic studies. According to these views, the racial identity of composers creates predisposition and can provide some insight into their musical creations. As this paper delves into the complexities of racial identity influence on artistic expression, it is intriguing to apply this perspective to the realm of music. During the interwar period in Poland, a fascinating fusion of Slavic elements intertwined with global aspirations emerging in the musical scene. This will be examined in the following section. Yes, if we can, please. In 1936, composers Jerzy Petersburski, in collaboration with lyricist Zenon Friedwald, embarked on a remarkable musical journey with the creation of To Ostatnia Niedziela, The Last Sunday. The musical composition captures the profound farewell between former lovers, an intense emotion that transcended cultural boundaries at the time. This song found a special place in the hearts of listeners, becoming a classic and a canvas for various artists, most notably Mieczysław Folk. The song opens with a melancholic tone through the use of a minor key, significantly slower tempo than a traditional Argentinian tango, rubato and emotional dynamics. A lush orchestration, including instruments like the bandoneon and violin, evokes a sense of nostalgia and emotion, with tango syncopated rhythms, 8-note rhythms interspersed between 16th notes, resonating further intensifying the dramatic atmosphere. The bandoneon, with its melancholic and expressive timbre, it is characteristic with its haunting and somehow mournful quality, which effortlessly infuses the music it touches with nostalgia and sentiment. Additionally, the prominent use of the clarinet in the composition mirrors the way that the instrument was often featured in klezmer music. Mournful yet spirited, the sound of the clarinet evokes the distinctive character of the Jewish melodies. Another defining element of the klezmer music presented here is the recurring presence of the doina, an improvised and expressive cadenza often performed on the clarinet of the violin, which serves as the introductory passage for the song. Let's hear it. Let's play the first video, the previous slide. Yes. can we please play the first recording? The one on the left, sorry. Yeah, I think I can stop here. It's 6 minutes ago. Thank you. Tostati and Nigella tells a story of a lost love and bittersweet memories, of farewell, and the song's character evokes a sense of introspection, allowing these listeners to connect and reflect with their own emotions. These aspects of the music are reminiscent of the Yiddish concept of Heimlichkeit, longing for the world as we found it, which conveys a sense of warmth and familiarity associated with traditional Jewish life. This feeling of cultural melancholy could be seen as reflective of the yearning for the past and a way of life that may have been disrupted or lost. The theme of nostalgia and longing for a past love is a universal sentiment, but it could also be interpreted as echoing the Jewish diaspora experience, where memories of a homeland and those connections are often cherished. As the tango grew in popularity, it inadvertently became intertwined with the turbulent history of World War II. During the war, this tango found itself in the most harrowing of circumstances. Its haunting melody accompanied the Jewish prisoners on their tragic marches with the confines of concentration camps. The song served as a stark and unintentional soundtrack to the unbearable suffering and hardship endured by those interned in these camps. We can go back to the previous slide, please. After the war, tango underwent a transformation and its cross into the Soviet Union. A Russian version entitled Utamlionnaya Solnce, The Weary Sound, was arranged by Yosif Alvik and performed by the celebrated Leonid Utyosov. The impact of Utamlionnaya Solnce transcended the war's end. Its timeless qualities found their place in cinematic productions like Nikita Mikhalkov, Burned by the Sun, in 1994, further solidifying its status as a very popular song from the period. Second recording on the right. Oh, sorry, starting for second 48, because this is basically the same one. Thank you.
Утомленное солнце нежно с морем прощалось. В этот час ты призналась, что нет любви. Мне немного взгрустнуло, без тоски, без печали. В этот час прозвучали слова твои.
In the case of Ostatnia Niedziela, elements of Jewish musical heritage can often be discerned, where the individual voices of Jewish composers may introduce nuanced elements that reflect their cultural identity and historical narrative. Thus, Sofia Lisa's previous assertion that musical expression can retain features associated with their ethnic or national background has some validity. While Lisa's perspective offered valuable insights into how cultural and historical context can shape artistic output, it is necessary to approach it critically. Essentialism, or the notion that certain characteristics are inherent to a certain ethnic or racial group can oversimplify complex creative processes. Even if ethnicity may influence an artist's point of view, artistic expression results from a very complex interplay of elements. Additionally, Baba's concept of the third space emphasizes here the in-between liminal space that emerges when different cultures interact. This concept allows us to explore how the tango evolved as it moved from its Polish origins into the Soviet Union, carrying with it elements of Jewish musical heritage. In the third space, cultural hybridity occurs, where different cultures mix and influence each other in unexpected ways. This is particularly relevant to the tango's transformation, as it's integrated. It is integrated. Excuse me. Yes, elements of Jewish musical heritage into its melodies and arrangements during its journey. Can we go on to the next slide? Created by the Polish Jewish composer Zygmunt Białystok, the tango Rivkele stands out as one of its most popular and frequently recorded musical creations. With ingenious artistry, Białystok seamlessly integrated fragments of well-known Hasidic Nigunim melodies, religious Jewish vocal music, into the fabric of the composition. The story revolves around the touching account of a Jewish shop assistant struggling with poverty. Her life takes an unexpected turn when, while buying a newspaper, she falls in love with a handsome non-Jewish man. Through her dreams, she imagines a more promising future with him. The tango masterfully portrays the intricate dance between longing, social boundaries, and aspiration for a better existence. Let's listen to it quickly.
Zum ersten Mal hat ihr gesehen und ihr gebeten allein, wenn hat häufen das Gewalt. Und seit schon dann pflegt nicht noch treten, oft nur bei ihr gebeten, sei mal einig schied die Gott mit Gott. Ich bin der Poritz fin ganzen Städten, leg dein Kapzon ich Kleidel, wart, aber ich malke, mach ich dir, ich will gar von dir, gar a kleinem Naden, sollst du sich vor mir abschmaden, in meine Palazzen nehm ich dich zu sich. Oi, du mein Bescherte, dein
So, as we can hear, this tango is not in Polish, but in Yiddish, which is a Germanic language. So this is an important difference to clarify. The story of the Yiddish tango Rivkele offers a fascinating lens through which questions of agency and cultural negotiation can be examined. Stewart's whole cultural politics theorization underscores the pivotal role of culture in shaping identities and power dynamics. Within the context of Rebecca, or Rivkele in Yiddish, the central character embodies agency through her actions and choices. Her initial attraction to a non-Jewish man, followed by her subsequent resistance rooted in her commitment to Jewish traditions and values, highlights the negotiation of identities. As you can read the lyrics, it says, Rivkele the small, Rivkele the small, charming, beautiful one, has run off with a Christian, and instead of a synagogue, she goes to church. I'll only be your friend. This is basically her picturing what would happen if she would run away with the Christian man, and explaining the reasons why she is not giving him to this love affair. So, next panel, please. The tango fusion of Yiddish and tango elements serves as a vivid embodiment of Homi Bhabha's concept of hybridity. It masterfully blurs the boundaries between cultural traditions, giving rise to unique cultural creation that defies easy categorization. This intricate amalgamation reflects the multifaceted nature of identity, especially in contexts marked by racial and cultural tensions. Within Baba's conceptualization of resistance within the third space, Rifkele's character continues to exemplify this dynamic. Her actions and choices become a testament to the complexities of cultural negotiation as she navigates the clash between religious and cultural values. The lyrics and narrative vividly depict this collision, shedding light on the intricate web of representation and identity woven into such encounters. In conclusion, the interbellum period of Poland stands as a pivotal era marked by the transformative fusion of Argentinian and Polish cultures. Introduced through various media such as gramophone records, newspapers, and radio broadcasts, tango quickly rose to prominence and reshaped the country's musical landscape. When viewed through the analytical frameworks of Baba and Stuart Hall, and considering previous scholarly insights from perspectives of Sofia Lisa and Yusef Heiss on the concept of Jewishness in music, tango emerges as a veritable third space that defies this simple categorization. It represents a musical hybridity that transcends the boundaries of Argentina, Polish, and Jewish influences, a testament to the process of negotiation and representation at play. This fusion embodied fluid identities and vividly demonstrates the musical ability to transcend cultural divisions. The enduring legacy of this tango phenomenon, born of the collaborative efforts of both Jewish and non-Jewish musicians, continue to resonate to this day. It serves as a lasting testament to the interplay of cultures and the power of music to bridge divides, creating a cultural tapestry that remains a poignant reflection of its time. In tango's melodic strains and lyrical tales, one can find not only the voices of the past, but also a profound reminder of the enduring human spirit and its ability to find harmony amidst diversity. So, I guess we move on to the questions.
Okay, thank you, Santiago. We might have some little time for questions, so please be brief.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that the song on the last Sunday was wildly popular here in Lithuania too. We had this singer, actor Antanas Šabaniauskas, born in 1903, died in 1907, so it's like the same period of time. And a quick Google search shows me that the most recent version of the song was made in 2004 by pop singer Violeta Reubiškytė, so it's still alive here.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I guess there was a lot of interconnection between Lithuania and Poland, especially back then when Vilnius was a Polish city. So, I mean, these traditions were moving across many Eastern European countries. And we previously mentioned how this tango was also very famous in Russia, as it was featured in several Soviet movies. So, yeah, I think there was a lot of fluidity in terms of how this music traveled around different places.
Actually, I could say the same for Serbia. I mean, the tango that my mother used to hum in as late as 1960s or 70s, I only recently discovered that it actually came not from Germany. We imported it from Germany, but there it was imported from Poland. So I think we have to move on. So let's thank Santiago once again.
Thank you very much.
And we are about to welcome our next presenter, who is here in person, Yusuf Keishi, using the folk song elements, Jonas Schroeder's composition strategies.
With sound or without sound? With sound. With sound. Okay.
So, hello everyone. My name is Yusuke Ishii. I'm a doctoral student from Kaunas University of Technology. And my research is on the works of Lithuanian composers who immigrated to United States during the interwar and the post-war period. And today I would like to talk about Lithuanian composer Jonas Švedas, who is one of these immigrants, and his early works. So Švedas was born in 1926, and due to the World War II, he evacuated to Germany first and immigrated to United States after, so where he remained for the rest of his life. And that's why he studied first in Vilnius in Lithuania, and then in Pinneberg in Germany, and Chicago in the US. And during the interwar period in Lithuania, the concept of national music was an essential issue for the composers. So that's why they actively took part in discussion, and sometimes even the polemics occurred. And each composer aimed to create the music in the concept of national music, but in quite different ways. One of them is simply to use the country's folk songs as a resource of composition. So this is a quite simple way to aim to create music in the concept of national music. However, the most of cases, it was limited to simple harmonization of the folk songs for applied music. Because this kind of applied music, I mean, not academic music, was a part of essential repertory, which is necessary for the musical events such as song festival Dainų Šventė, which represent Lithuanian culture not only in Lithuania, but also in diaspora in United States. One of these composers in diaspora who harmonized Lithuanian folk song is Kazimieras Vanaitis Viktoras. Viktoras Vanaitis, sorry, who left over the 500 folk songs harmonizations. In addition to this kind of repertory of applied music, there was also the composers called modernists, who aimed to incorporate folk song elements into their works in quite unique ways. So I mentioned here two composers. One is Vytautas Bacevičius and another is Darius Lapinskis. For example, Vytautas Bacevičius, he wrote two piano concerto on Lithuanian themes. But unfortunately, we can obviously see a lack of coherency of style because of a rough method of inserting folk songs themes directly into the modern harmony. And they were not very successful work. But David's piano concerto were criticized by the composer critic Vladas Jakubėnas for the composer's narrow conceptual understanding of national music. Another composer, Darius Lapinskas, was a contemporary of Jonas Švedas, and he was fascinated in the extraordinary melodic and rhythmic richness of Lithuanian folklore. So Lapinskas said that in his work, for example, Mergaitės dalia, for mezzo-soprano and orchestra, he tried to develop the melodic and rhythmic elements of folk songs that he used without adding anything that was not inherent to these songs. So unlike other composers who used folk songs, Darius Lapinskas used the folk song element in his works by taking a quite scientific approach, rather similar to Bela Bartok. However, in the case of both composers here, so folk songs or folk songs theme remains as a theme or a subject rather than a material, as they remade it using modern compositional technique. So anyway, folk songs were also an important topic for the Lithuanian composer in diaspora, whether as an object of scientific research or as material for creating national music. So while the diaspora composers' interests were in general in choir or symphonic genre, that's an essential part of repertory of Daino Svente. Jonas Schweda's interest was always being chamber music, so he never wrote for choir or symphonic orchestra. One of Schweda's friend, dramaturgist Kostas Ostrauskas, mentioned that Schwedas loved to sing a collection of folk songs compiled by the composer Stasi Shimks. However, actually, only two of Jonas Schweda's compositions were folk themed. So one is the harmonization for voice and piano, Kada Norberg, I Cry Why I Want. And the other one is musical sketch number 1 for piano, which I want to talk about today. So this was the beginning of the piece. And this musical sketch number 1 is based on the Lithuanian folk song Tu 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 Kas Būtų. Now. So I'm very sorry, this is quite small and hard to read. This is the lyrics of songs. As you can see from the lyrics, it is quite lively song about the wish and celebration for the good harvest. And so this is quite interesting that Jonas Schwedas did not mention the title of this song anywhere, as if like he wanted to hide it. And it is not very clear how Jonas Schwedas chose these folk songs. So I suppose that it was taken from the collection of folk songs by Kazimieras Viktoras Banaitis, which I mentioned before. He harmonizes the same folk songs. So due to the way it is harmonized and the way the melody is dispersed into various parts, like in a choir. In his musical sketch number 1, Schwedas used only the second strophe of the folk songs and harmonized it with the harmony of quarter chords, but maintained the original strophic structure of folk songs and making it monothematic without any formal development. So we can almost call it a kind of harmonization of folk songs rather than an original composition. Here, the lively folk songs is dominated by a quite melancholic atmosphere due to the quarter chord. So this musical sketch was written in 1959, and the same year he wrote 3 standards for voice and piano. So this song cycle was composed based on the text of Schweda's contemporary poet Kadis Bradurnes. We can now listen the beginning of stanza number 3. Okay. As we can hear, the melody of this song was taken from the same folk song mentioned before. Also, if we compare the structure of musical sketch number 1 and stanza number 3, we can see that they maintain the same strophic structure and the content is almost same. And so we can call it a kind of recomposition. And thus the introduction and the postlude were not part of the musical sketch structure. And here in the stanza number 3, Jonas Schweda's musical idiom as development developed. This piece is based on quite free tonality, and the texture of music was quite pointillistic. And it is interesting that the introduction and the postlude, which were not included in musical sketch, they use a kind of 12-tone techniques. However, this is not a strict application of this technique, but rather something similar to chromatic compilation. By the way, in the Lithuanian diaspora in United States, the earliest work using the 12-tone technique was Julius Gaidelis trio for the violin and clarinet basson, written in 1961. So the Jonas Schweda stanza number 3 can be an example of the earliest use of 12-tone technique in diaspora. Now, the melody of folk song is diatonic. So how did Schwedas weave the diatonic melody into the texture supported by tonality or 12-tone techniques? This is kind of issue of bringing diatonic melody into the decaphony or some atna texture was also seen in the works of post-war Lithuanian composers such as Eduard Balsis in his oratorio Nelieskite Melino Gaublio. But in the Balsis case, the basic tone row itself includes a lot of diatonic intervals. So that was his Balsis solution. Now, this is the basic row of Jonas Schweda's stanza number 3. The last 2 notes, C sharp and E flat, are not used in introduction or postlude. The C sharp comes out already in the first strophe of the melody. So, as you can hear, the finishing tone of the basic melody was changed now to C sharp, which makes a very strange 7th interval, which completely deforms the expression of melody, as if Schwedas declined the folkloreness of this song. Another sound E flat was in use in culmination point here. in both cases, the C sharp and E flat from the tone row were inserted in a diatonic melody in a dispersive way, so as it intentionally distorts the melody of a folk song. So I think there was a reason for that, and it will be clear we look at the lyric of stanza number 3. So for this piece, Jonas Schwedas used Kazis Bradunas poem titled The Plague, Mars. The original folk song melody, a lively song waiting for the harvest, now has been rewritten the theme of death, epidemic, and starvation. So this kind of decontextualization of melody was quite unique in works using Lithuanian folk songs. Although the melody shapes and strophic structure remains the same, in this piece, the folkloreness that we feel always in works using folk songs now has completely disappeared. As a modernist composer who could not avoid the national music issue, now Schweda's solution is quite exceptional in the context of diaspora in the United States. So this is one of the few examples of work in which heterogeneous elements are harmonized quite in a successful way. However, Schweda's the contextualization of folk songs as a compositional strategy is rather intuitive than intentional deformation. So for me, this seems to me like a compromise between national and global music. I here mentioned some example of the contextualization of folkloric or other musical materials. Jonas Schweda's case is more similar to the case of, for example, Prokofiev Piano Concerto No. 3 or Messiaen's 20 Regards for Piano than Stravinsky's Serenade in A. So Jonas Schwedas did this kind of decontextualization of folk songs also in his later works, or I hope that I can talk about his another work next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The floor is open. Please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting that you chose Jonas Schwedas like a center of your talk, and because maybe you know there are so many examples how composers chose Lithuanian folk songs, and your center was that Tu kas būtų song, yeah? My question is very simple. Why? Why you chose Jonas Schwedas like an example, not other composers? Because there are so many examples of how they use folk songs in the same way like Schwedas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe the answer is very simple because he's not very known, even in Lithuania. And that I think that's why he never wrote for the choir music, which is very essential in Lithuanian music context. And for example, even the Darius Lapinskis, who wrote a lot of opera but not choir, is more known than Jonas Schwedas. But as I know that his Jonas Schwedas' compositional skill and this quality of work is very high, although he's not very known. So I just wanted to show even to the Lithuanians that you have this kind of very composer of high quality.
And
Okay.
I want to thank you for choosing Jonas Schwedas, because we have 3 composers named Schwedas in Lithuania: Vladas Schwedas and 2 Jonas Schwedas.
Yes. Yes.
So it's quite confusing. I actually thought you were going to talk about another Jonas Schwadas, but what? He didn't immigrate to US. He was one of the co-authors of Soviet Lithuanian anthem. What? Oh, we have another one.
Yes.
Okay, I was really excited to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So,
Anyone else, please?
Hi, thank you for a very interesting talk. I'm curious to learn more about the harmonizations of Lithuanian folk songs by Banaitis. What do you think of them? Do you think that they're good harmonizations? Do you have any comments on their quality or the way they either support or undermine the original spirit of the folk songs?
yes, you are talking about Banaitis, right? Banaitis' case, he's very conservative, and his goal of composition was namely to create national music, not like Jonas Schwadas. So, but as I know and as I read the Banaitis score, so how to say, he mixed a kind of very, because he studied Leipzig. So in his work, we can hear this kind of influence from German tradition. But in the work of Banaitis, so this kind of balance of between the folklorers and this German tradition are quite good, successfully harmonized.
Can I make another comment?
Okay,
Is there time? Because the reason why I ask is partly because I'm very interested in, and people who heard my presentation yesterday will know that I'm interested and have done some harmonizations or arrangements of folk songs from Taiwan, and in England we have a musicologist called Cecil Taylor from I think he's called, I might have misremembered the name, Cecil Sharp from the start of the 20th century, who did a huge number of harmonizations of English folk songs, and was very influential on the reception of English folk songs, or the perception of English folk songs, and was later criticized for essentially changing or distorting the meaning of the songs, or classicizing them in a way that wasn't faithful to the original spirit of the songs. So I was interested to know whether Banaitis's harmonizations had a similar sort of reception or influence in Lithuania. So that's the origin of my interest in that aspect of your talk.
It's quite hard to answer because I'm not specialist of Banaitis, so I don't know. But in the song festival of in United States, in the Lithuanian community, so Banaitis is quite popular, as I know. So so in the song of in the song festival, so they often song the folk song harmonized by Banaitis. So I think the reception of folk songs harmonized by Banaitis is quite good. I don't know how it's in Lithuania, but at least in United States, it's quite good receptors. I think like that.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would really very much appreciate a cup of coffee. So let's take a break. Thank you for once again. And
sorry, I would just like to say I do need to leave, but thank you very much for inviting me today. And yes, thank you.
I believe we are all here, ready for the next three presenters. Of course, one by one. Heroic Melodramas and Nordic Romantic Nationalism is a paper to be delivered by Aretol. Is that how you pronounce that? Okay, from Estonia. Well, okay.
Which one is the volume knob here? The volume is which one? Oh, that's, oh, okay, yes. Thank you. Let's start with a very definition of what melodrama is. The word melodrama has become part of the popular vernacular as an adjective. An utterance is referred to as melodramatic when it is, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, showing much stronger emotions that are necessary or usual for a situation. Melodramatic, therefore, means something that appears to be pushed to the very limit. Popular usage of the word aside, melodrama is in fact a much more concrete term for musical works or theatrical acts in which spoken text is performed against a musical backdrop. Melodramatic scenes can be encountered in operas and as part of drama performances. This presentation, however, concerns melodramas as standalone works meant to be performed as concert pieces. From the very beginning of the genre in the second half of the 18th century, myths, legends, and various mysterious or supernatural topics have often been chosen as the subject matter of melodramas. The work often quoted as one of the trailblazers of that genre is the lyric scene Pygmalion by Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Horace Coignet, based on Ovid's Metamorphoses, and other composers such as the Czech Jiří Antonín Benda were also very much active as composers of melodramas in the period. In the ensuing Romantic age, fascination with heroic legends became intimately linked with ideas of national self-identification, especially in the Nordic region and Central Europe. Born out of 18th century fascination with what was considered as a manifestation of noble simplicity, melodramas then became a vehicle of national sentiments, sometimes equally invested with visions of the simple and noble way of life in the old heroic times. In the 1830s, the Norwegian poet Henrik Wegeland coined the well-known metaphor of two half rings to describe early 19th century Norway on the one hand and its distinguished medieval past on the other. These two halves of a ring he proposed to reunite. In Estonia, then part of the Russian Empire, there was a cultural upheaval in the 1860s that later became known as the period of national awakening. The Estonian national aspirations of that period found its literary monument in a work of epic poetry composed by Friedrich Reinhold Kreutzwald, titled after the Estonian mythical hero Kalevipoeg. Poeg means son, so it is the son of Kalev. Kalevipoeg can be described then as the Estonian equivalent of the perhaps better known Finnish epic Kalevala that had been published about 25 years earlier. Despite some characters and narrative elements in common, the two epics are in fact quite different in their overall tone. As some literary scholars have pointed out, there is more mystique and symbolism in the Finnish Kalevala, while the Estonian epic Kalevipoeg also excels in blood-stained naturalism. Kalevipoeg, a fundamental text of Estonian literature, called for a musical monument of similar grandeur. The one who embarked on the mission of writing such a work was the composer Rudolf Tobias. His reputation in Estonian music historiography is well reflected in the fact that Tobias was chosen in the early 1990s to be portrayed on the Estonian 50 kron banknote. While Tobias had settled in Berlin in search of conditions more suitable for his creative endeavors, and his magnum opus, the oratorio Des Jona-Sendung, was premiered in Leipzig in 1909, he remained sympathetic to the Estonian national cause, and no other creation, he assumed, could serve that cause better than a musical setting of the epic Kalevipoeg. His plan to compose an opera based on the epic never materialized. However, among the works that he composed in preparation for that project and perhaps intended to incorporate in it were two melodramas for narrator and orchestra, Kalevipoeg's Dream and the epilogue of Kalevipoeg. These two works have remained largely unknown in Estonia as well, as currently there are no printed scores or commercially released recordings available. Here you can see the beginning of Kalevipoeg's Dream as it is in the speaker's part. The spoken text is tightly interrelated with music, and the phrases are to be uttered at specific points of time. Therefore, you can see orchestral cues are provided here so that the speaker knows when to start his part. The excerpt from Kalevipoeg's Dream you will now hear is from an archive recording made in 1973. The verses in that sound clip, based on the 12th canto of the epic, describe the forging of Kalevipoeg's sword by the apprentices of the Finnish master blacksmith Ilmarinen. So the Finnish topic is here, and it sounds like this.
Mõõka tehti salamahti, vaikses varjunikus kojas, peitelikus kaljupõues. Salamäe sügavusse seadnud Ilmarise sellid, maa-alused meistrid, ilusama sepikojad. Kus nad ööd ja pikad päevad salatöösid sobitasid, tarbe.
Yes, I hope you noticed that motive played here by the clarinets, and this is. Yes, perhaps we could make it a bit louder. So it's a quotation of Sibelius's Second Symphony. The direct nature of spoken text in melodramas is often accompanied by an equal measure of musical descriptiveness. In this example, the forging of the sword is represented by cymbal strikes and a motive played by the clarinets. The latter can be considered indeed as a quotation. Note the delicacy of orchestration in Tobias's example. This is often motivated by practical considerations. Spoken text can be overshadowed by orchestral textures more easily than an operatic singing voice. Now let us turn to the other melodrama by Tobias, the epilogue of Kalevipoeg, based on the 20th canto from the epic. In this final canto, Kalevipoeg meets the gruesome destiny that he has brought on himself because of his previous thoughtless actions. The reasons of Kalevipoeg's demise lie in the tale about forging the sword that reached its climax when Kalevipoeg drew his newly acquired weapon while drunk and in the heat of an argument beheaded or killed the son of the blacksmith. In revenge, Kalevipoeg was then destined to be killed by his own sword. In the final canto, Kalevipoeg leads his people to war against the aggression of knights in iron armor, an allusion to the Crusades in northeastern Europe in the early 13th century. Then, however, Kalevipoeg made a fatal mistake and stepped into a certain Käärpa river, where his sword, previously stolen from him, severed his feet because of the curse put on him in revenge. here you can see the first page of the score, and it is indeed scored for a large orchestra. So we have the bass clarinet and the double bassoon here as well. Kalevipoeg then mounted a white horse. It is important that is a white horse, and was banished to the underworld, where he's being held in captivity at the gates of hell as a Promethean symbol of Estonia's former glory, expected to return when the time is right to bring his children happiness and build Estonia's life anew. So you can see a depiction of Kalevipoeg by Kristjan Raud and no feet. The epilogue of Kalevipoeg was one of the works performed in a concert of WS's music in 1914 in Berlin, its German title then being Kalev's Letzte Ritte. Interestingly, none other than Jean Sibelius was among the audience, as proved by this entry in his diary. I heard Rudolf Tobias's Kalevipoeg. Yes, yes. Well, it would be interesting to know what he meant by this. Yeah, yes, yes. Sibelius himself had composed several melodramas, such as the Wood Nymph on a poem by Victor Rydberg. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, composers often relied on methods of tonal signification to illustrate certain emotionally captivating but also strange or uncanny topics, including the greatest mystery of all, death. The death of Kalevipoeg is depicted in this excerpt performed by the orchestra and organ. So let's hear this, this passage. Kalevipoeg's soul departed from his dead body as a dove, then states the speaker. Also note the third related harmonies here, and an ascending passage is played by the solo violin, built on an augmented triad. As the half-dead, half-alive Kalevipoeg mounted a white horse, Tobias illustrates this by using one of the favorite 19th century musical topics with horn calls and galloping riffs in 6/8 time as its characteristics. Kalevipoeg thus becomes something of a cursed huntsman, perhaps not unlike the one depicted in the symphonic poem Le Chasseur Maudit by César Franck. So the text is then represented in quite a pictorial way in Tobias's melodrama. It is perhaps possible to draw a link between 19th century melodramas and a genre that emerged a couple of decades later in the late 1920s and 30s due to advancements in technology, that is radio drama. In radio dramas, spoken text was often accompanied by music or special sound effects. For example, as galloping horses were mentioned in a play, a galloping sound could be produced in the studio to illustrate that. This kind of radio dramas, once highly popular, are now heard very rarely on the air. However, instead of further investigating the possible legacy of melodramas in modern media, let us briefly retreat to the 19th century and observe some other instances of heroic melodramas, especially in the Nordic region. An eloquent example can be found in the output of the Danish composer Johann Peter Emilius Hartmann. Guldhornen, or the Golden Horns, was composed in 1832 and is based on a well-known poem by Adam Oehlenschläger. It refers to the golden horns of Gallerhus, dating from the 5th century, that were discovered in the 17th and 18th centuries, stolen in 1802 and irretrievably lost. The horns became a symbol of Danish romanticism. Storm winds bellow, blackens heaven, comes the hour of melancholy. Back is taken what was given, vanished is the relic, holy, declamates the speaker against a conforco orchestral backdrop.
Hædre dem til skæbnens skalter, snart måske de er forsvunden. Jesu blod på Herrens alter, fylde dem som blodet i lunden. Men I se kun guldets lue, ikke der værdigt høje. Sætte dem som pragt til skue, for et mat nysgerrigt øje. Du er kommen. Hvad de gav, de tog tilbage. Evig bortsvandt helligdommen.
Sense of loss predominates also in Edvard Grieg's Bergljot, a melodrama based on the saga of Harald Hardrada, as adapted by Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson in his poem. It is a story of how the noblest chief of the Northland, Einar Damberskjælve, and his son Eindride were murdered in a cowardly ambush ordered by Harald, as witnessed by Damberskjælve's widow Bergljot. The total duration of the melodrama is approximately 18.5 minutes in the recording I have chosen. The battle scene, which occupies the first 5 minutes of the work, leads to an andante molto section, the beginning of which you can see here, where Bergljot announces the death of Damberskjælve. After the descriptions of Bergljot's conflicting emotions and quest for vengeance, the work concludes in resignation with a funeral march. The announcement of the death of Damberskjælve and Eindride in Andante Molto is what we will now hear. So it's about 2 minutes.
Magnus mer enn fader, kong Knut, den store skårede sønnerråd. Fallen for snikmord, skytten fra Svolder, løven som sprang over Lyrskogheden. Slaktet i bakhold, bøndernes høvding, brøndernes heder, Tandbergskjelve! Hvithåret, hedret.
As quoted earlier, melodramatic in the most general sense can be defined as showing much stronger emotions that are necessary or usual for a situation. The three melodramas mentioned seem to live up to that promise. In all the 3 or 4 works, emotions are triggered by a sense of loss. In Rudolf Tobias's melodrama, the epilogue of Kalevipoeg, the troubled hero of the Estonian epic, is left confined to the gates of hell with a promise to return when called for. In the Golden Horns, vanished is the relic holy, and in Bergliot, fallen is the noblest chief of the Northland. Although the term melodrama lost much of its popularity during the 20th century, the phenomenon itself in its broader sense, performing spoken text with music, has remained essential to theatrical practices. Above all, these examples prove that even more than victories and triumph, loss and tragedy can serve as powerful stimuli that foster national identities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes for questions and discussion. Anyone?
Thanks for a really interesting talk. This is a repertoire that I'm not familiar with at all. But listening to the, especially the Hartmann and the Grieg, but most of all the Hartmann, it occurred to me that could we find an origin for Schoenberg's use of Sprechstimme in the melodrama? Because Schoenberg seems to be when he uses Sprechstimme in Pierrot Lunaire or in the later works with narrator, it seems like he's striving for a kind of heightened melodramatic speech. Have you ever do you know anything about sort of the possible connections there?
Yes, there is possibly a connection because melodramas were highly popular then in the German-speaking lands. Well, many composers can be cited, such as Max von Schilling or Engelbert Humperdinck and others. But also, perhaps Sprechgesang can be traced back to what Schoenberg had heard in cabarets. So the cabaret culture is also one of the aspects that could have been an influence on Sprechgesang.
Would there be a connection between the cabaret, the use of the narrator in cabaret and melodrama, or are they quite separate things?
Well, it is quite hard to define because, well, everything is connected with everything. But yes, and it is quite hard to define what the cabaret practices were in those days. But certainly, I think if we are to trace the phenomena that were derived from melodramas, then yes, perhaps radio dramas, because in in radio broadcast as well. We don't have the visual aspect. There is no action on the stage. Well, we can only hear, we cannot see. And in that sense, they can be quite similar to what melodramas used to be in the 19th century.
Okay, I wonder, your national epic. Okay, I can see some of the verses very, very clearly 19th century nationalism. But I suppose it was based on some kind of, do you have any significant body of epic folk poetry which sort of served as the basis or the source of inspiration for this 19th century epic?
Well, of course. In Estonia, we have the tradition of regi verse, or well, in Finland it's called Kalevala verse. Well, it's very similar to it. So we have 8 syllables in one verse line. There is also alliteration as well. These are some of the key aspects. So we have this tradition of regilaul, the runic song, and much of the epic was indeed based on some real folk poetry. However, it's ultimately an art epic, so it's not a collection of folk poetry, but largely or mostly it was still written by Kreutzwald.
And was this epic poetry sung or chanted to an instrumental accompaniment or something like that?
No, it is a sung tradition, so it's a song. Well, I could find an example here. Well, I hope that. Oh, yeah. Well, let's see if I can find an example. Now, I'm not sure if I can find the.
Well, perhaps.
Yes, I will need some more time, but there's
yeah,
a very good collection of, it's called the Anthology of Estonian folk songs. So it's online, and you can listen to some examples of regilaul. But I would also like to emphasize that yes, as you noticed, there are some clear 19th century influences, and perhaps it is a mistake to assume that that all the folk poetry dates from a indefinitely early age, from thousands and thousands years before our modern times. It may not be true. It probably isn't true, because folk poetry was also in a constant state of transition, and all the new influences, all what happened in those centuries was absorbed in folk poetry and is reflected in. So the 19th century topics as well are all there. But you may wonder why Kalevipoeg mounted a white horse. Well, perhaps because Napoleon used to ride a white horse. Well, we'll never know, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you once again. And I believe we again switch to online presentations. Olena Dyadchikova. Do we have Olena?
Yes. I present here, and I ask permit me share with screen, and we can start. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm not confident in English now. And of course, I will read my text, but of course, it's don't. But it's possible to continue discuss about this wonderful topic for this conference. Okay. Hello for everyone. I am glad to take part in the work of this conference. Its topic is one of the most relevant today. It relates to the actual situation in modern music culture and has obvious potential for further researcher. I thank the organized committee for the opportunity to present my observation and thoughts of this idea in direction. Okay, the presentation focuses on the phenomenon of traditional performance practice. Please treat this term as a working of the European numerous explanation. Still, in the end, it can accurately describe in interaction between folklore and contemporary music. The situation involving folklore in an experimental music context, electroacoustic music, jazz fusion, improvised music, and music in the intermediate text, music for film, theater performance, are our subject study. In this direction of musical art, the priority of the oral tradition is evident. Creativity is realized not through interpreting the text written by the composer, but directly in process of making music. Okay. In this regard, folklore and experimental music interaction seems entirely organic. The definition of traditional performance will be used further as a derivative of the term traditional music and as a synonym of the word folklore. We will be talking not so much about traditional music performance, but folk musician, but about the restoration of folk performance by professional musicians. Such restoration take place in conditions other than those of folklore. As a rule, we are talking about concerts that involve division into audience and performers and contained and entertainment element. What remains of folklore tradition in this performance? In addition of the obvious things, melody, rhythm, lyric, sound flavor, specific good production, and artistic elation remained first and foremost. The elements are mastered and present with particular care and traditional performance. The sound traditional performance practice. The sound color of folklore turned out to be the most tangible and at the same time socially vulnerable aspect. The changed sound distinguish aesthetic music from examples of the socialist realism tradition, pop culture, and music kitsch. The sound is also closely connected with a particular area and acts as the musical calling card of a specific region. In the area of the socialist totalitarian regime, such individualization of sound posed a direct threat of ideological myth. Therefore, the certain tendency aimed to destroy perspective, its sound coloring in the song. Let's compare the sound of folk song in the adapted and traditional performances. At various times, the repertoire of the National Honored Academical Folk Choir of Ukrainian, named after Georgy Verevka, included different music, including work writing by Ukrainian composer and example of political propaganda. Therefore, the sound appearance of this group has a specific of the universality of sound, temperate sound structure, pieces rhythm, and transparent distribution of voice in polyphony.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Okay.
Are we supposed to hear something? We don't hear anything.
Oh,
You have to share sound. There is a
okay.
box share
Yes,
sound that you
I
have.
understand. I understand. Just a minute. Okay, okay, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, try again.
No, I'm afraid we don't hear anything.
Okay, it's very pity because okay, I try to find alternative to presentation format, but it's don't work. Okay, maybe perhaps I need to send the link for these examples. For these examples, or share on my folder, but I think it's take time. Okay.
Can you excuse me? I had a good suggestion. Can you click the arrow next to the microphone? If you have a screen and in the corner you have.
Yes, I have screen, corner, microphone, mute.
Right.
Okay.
It is.
There
should be a share sound option. If you click the
audio setting, audio setting. Maybe. Okay. Okay. Just try some other version.
As far as I remember, it should be on share screen, and then there is a box to tick.
Yes. Yes, and I try to present Verevka from my folder. Okay. Okay, I see information about this note share in last time. Okay. Okay, I sent a link in attachment for, in my presentation, and I hope we can hear it. Okay. Such folklore groups were the one-time and calling card for folk art in the countries of the social group. Pavel Pavlikovsky delighted this situation in the film called Zima Voyna, released in 2018. Unlike universal folk choir starting from the 7th of the 20th century, in historical informed performance began to the development, including in the direction of the authentic international of the folk music. In Ukrainian, the ensemble Treva and its leader Yevgen Yefremov led this process. Performers place special attention to the manner of the performance and all sorts of specific manifestation in the texture of the folk song. The Dreva ensemble started concert activity in 1979 and became Ukraine's first scientific and ethnographic ensemble. And participants radically changed the idea of performing folk songs. I'm sorry. Ukrainian folk songs were performed on stage with an open, loud natural sound for this first time, exactly as it is and living oral tradition since the group founder, the ethnomusicologist Evgen Yefrenov, has been the constant leader. In here, in article about the ensemble, Hanna Pelina noticed that Dreva initiated a new scientific and reconstructed direction on folklore song performance in Ukraine. Sometimes such singing is also called secondary, in opposite to primary, actually authentic. The impact of the activity of the Dreva ensembles of Ukrainian culture was and extraordinary. In different years, the ensembles included musicians and musicologists who later became influential leaders of Ukrainian musical culture. Often the ensemble members formed their own independent ensembles, artistic group, and artistic project. In the 1990s and 2000s, the following folk groups appears themselves. Gilka, Дике Поле, Володар, Ottawa, the instrumental band Добрий день, Божичі, Гуртоправці, Селюки, Дичка, and many others. The musical materials collected by the member of Dreva became the basic of work of both academic and experimental tradition. Dreva prepared records for audio disc published in Poland, France, and Ukraine. The songs of Dreva were in popular documentaries, animated film, and a feature film. For example, Mamai with music of Zakajkevich, Pavadir of Zakajkevich, and other. Under the influence of cooperation with the ensemble, Dreva, the founder of the Center of Contemporary Art DACH, Vladislav Troitsky, initiated the appearance of the ensemble in the direction of world music DACH Bracha. The Dreva ensemble participants could represent a completely different direction of experimental music. Thus, ensemble singer and composer Petro Tavstuha was a member of the improvisation music trio with Alexander Nesterov and Yuri Yaremchuk. The singer and instrumentalist of the ensemble, Sergei Akhrimchuk, was simultaneously a member of the trio of improvisation music SAT. He also became a member of the band Hareya Kazatska and numerous projects of almost all musical genres, from rock music to free jazz and other. Anna Zakajkevich, a Dreva ensemble member, later led electroacoustic music in Ukraine. Her efforts established in Music Information Technologies Department and the National Academy of Music. Anna Zakajkevich founded the Ambiziga Electronic Music Festival and the author of the music for numerous films. The algorithm of interpretation Dreva into musical experimental space. In the algorithm of integration of the member of the Dreva ensemble into the musical experimental space, the following characteristic attract attention. All members of Dreva have a certain musical universalism, absolutely openness to all historical styles of musical art, and radiance to creativity of various directions. The targeted construction of one's performance practice space, free for interactive interaction in new composition with other musicians. Primary attention to sound, activity study of sound, its color and spectral properties. Change of attitude towards folklore. A folk song is not a historical artifact, but a living organism that still exists and reproduced through performance practice. As for the research of sounds through the involvement of a folk song and experimental context, special attention is drawn to the vocals that the Dreva anthem recorded during folklore expeditions in the zone of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It is about the cycle of Rusalki, mermaid, song of the ritual act. In Ukrainian, Rusalki are the dead who come to the living of the certain days of the year. The procession of Rusalki is an exciting rite in the village after Trinity Week. The Rusalny songs of Kiev Polisia are rightly considered one of the most archaic examples of folklore preserved in Europe. The tragedy of the life of this music is that after the accident of the Chernobyl, many of the performers of folk song moved to other regions. But after moving, the folk singer lost their semantic connection with the land, and their kind burned into the Rusalki. So the song ceased to exist. Thanks to the self-knowledge and research work to the Dreva members, this layer of folk music was recorded. Rusalny's songs have great potential for sound experiments. As the oldest example of folk creativity, they have intonation, laconism, and formulaic thinking, but from the point of view of experiments with sound and stratification of sound nature is essential here. Several plans. One plan connects to the real world, the other with the world of the dead. A specific sound defined a sound vector, and among folklorism has and terminological name hukania. Hukanya, it's like yodel, is an appeal but sound to the other world. Dreva, the example that I attempted to show the Dreva, the Rusalnya song, Боровая Zazulina. There are various correlations between the three traditional performance practice and other techniques in experimental works. Alexander Nesterov work radiates sound as an universal musical space formed by the interaction of folk performance and electronic acoustic improvisation practice. The album contains the filed recording of the folklore in the Chernobyl area, performed by Dreva with the participation of musician performers of the modern music, Sergei Kuryukhin drums and Yuri Yarinchuk saxophone. According to Nesterov idea, the performance of the folk song in the work take place against the background of the electronic soundscapes. This work was performed from the first time of April 22, 1996 in Maidan Nezalezhnosti, Independence Square in Kyiv. In Alexander Nesterov cycle, the Rusalna song cycle is the base for the finale of the album second number. Nature Morte. The composition of the young composer Andrei Barsov, Nature Morte. In Ukrainian, this is a very interesting play words. Its meaning Nature Morte, still life, but in music it's the nature and mort. Continues the line of the Rusalna songs of the Chernobyl zone from the Dreva collection. The composer wrote the piece last year. Investigation the logic of the musical image. We can talk about the artistic text in a documentary style. This text can be as a symbol of a time. The author himself says that he wrote his music quite quickly. In a certain ways, the speed influences the author interpretation of composition. Andrei repeatedly called the raw music. Perhaps this epithet reflected the extreme simplicity of the acoustic result. Everything begins with two main conflicting components: an age-old tradition, which is symbolized by a ritual song from the Rusalna series, and the sounds of the series and explosion happening in Ukrainian land here and now. They composed use a recording from Evgeny Yefremov's collection, the Rusalna song Kiev region, Ivankivsky district, village Orane. The specific sound material, explosion sounds, was taken from the sound of 2022 collection, Real Fight Records by Denis Vasilyev from Zaporizhia, UA. The combination of the Asian sound preserved through many centuries and the sounds the end life immediately accurate and symbolic meanings. Simplicity, comprehensibility, and ability work in favor of symbol here. Ancient Rusalna songs have a magical basic. They appeal to the dead from the sake of life. Therefore, against the background of the sound of war, such an appeal acquires additional meanings. Another cycle of the semantic is related to the confrontation of culture projects. The work must present the absence of the musical practices. Concerning the previous samples, we can define this as a hostile reception, where here is a clash of the artifact of culture and the fact of reality. Such a collision takes place without the participation of the lyric hero, so statement itself gravitation towards documentary. Conclusion and discussion. On the example of the process taking place in Ukrainian musical culture, it's possible to assume a fundamental change in the understanding of folklore and its performance and musical culture is as a unit. As a result of the observation regarding the interaction of traditional performance practice and experimental music are in a certain harmony with the there of the book by Nicholas Cook, Music as Creative Practice, Oxford University Press, 2018. In one of the reviews for this publication, the author notes, you need recently ideas of creative in music revolved around composers in garrets and the lone genius. But the last decade, the witness a sea change. Musical creativity is now our helmly, so in the terms of collaboration and real-time performance. Music is as creative practice encompass the classical tradition, jazz and popular music, and music emergence as an area in which changing concept of creativity form the old myth about genius. To present day as social-cultural theory can be traced with clarity. The perspective of clarity tells as much about music, but the reverse is also true. And this fifth and last installment of the studies on musical performance and creative practice series offers approach to musical creativity that is attitude to the practice of the both musical and everyday life. Thank you for your attention. And I must show the reference and my acknowledgements. And of course, thank you for your patience with my links. And I have a great opportunity to send to you via email a presentation with a link and connect and continue our connection. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I cannot hear you.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, thank you. I just can't help commenting on the last part of your presentation with your mention Nicholas Cook with his famous statement, "We are all ethnomusicologists now." Anyhow, the floor is open for questions and comments. Anyone? Well, you can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much.
You mentioned this folklore from Chernobyl area and people who were displaced and sort of cut their roots from their traditional land, the area they lived. Now, we from the Balkans know very much about this displacements, refugee sort of thing. Has it been noticed so far that some specific new developments in folk music have occurred owing to people being displaced and being in contact with similar but not exactly the same culture?
Yes, it's very interesting questions. Very interesting and very difficult because really we have in Ukrainian unification with the archaic form of folklore connect with rite and ritual and the personification ears of ground, yes, mother ground, of mother ears, motherland, as a myth object. And of course, with cutting the roots, as you know, the folklore death. Of course, it's really a tragic situation, and Evgeny Yefremov, Evgeny Yefremov, they put on a great forces for the keeping this folklore via records and disc and other. But what about contact? For the contact, we need a very long tradition and very long time to be neighbor with one culture with other culture. In we have region with very interesting connection culture, for example, Carpathian region, whereas the contact had been a long time for Jewish culture and Ukrainian culture. We have a similar phenomenon, for example, traisty muziki and klezmer's music instrument traditional. And of course, it's a very specific topic, and I gratitude for this great question. I will sing and I will continue to discuss with you via my maybe.
Well, okay, thank you. Somebody else? Well, in this case, it's just the right time to have our, I believe, the last presenter for today. Which is again online, and I believe I can see Guanza Gvinyu. I'm sorry. We keep meeting in Tbilisi, but I still haven't been able to memorize your name. Really apologize. If you were here, I would ask before, but anyhow, the issue of the relationship between national and global in Barandashvili's vocal cycle, Songs of Wine and Love. Of course, we know how good Georgian wines are. I'm looking forward to at least listening to something of it, if not drinking it right now. So please.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, we do.
Yes, and do you see the next screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I will start. First of all, thank you, organizers. Thank you, Milos, and my greetings from Georgia. So I will start. So this article deals with a threat-promoting aspect of the composing paradigm, the balance between national and global, as a compositional dilemma in general, and in particular in relation to Georgian music, which is discussed in the example of postmodern Israeli and Georgian composer Joseph Bardanashvili's compositional style. The object of the article is Bardanashvili's bilingual English and Hebrew vocal cycle, Songs of Wine and Love, and purpose of study is to determine an overview of the problem of a relationship between national and the global in general and in Georgian music, how composer turns Georgian ethnic and Jewish synagogue music into modern cultural paradigm and solves the problem of national and global synthesis. So within the framework of today's ever-evolving globalized world and Western postmodern society, where identities are fluid and global connections are ubiquitous, delicate balance between national and global identities has become a central theme of cultural discourse, not by chance. The dialectical relationship of global and national may be considered as progress and preservation at the same time. It also may metaphorically be called harmonious discord because it implies a seemingly mutually exclusive fusion. But if we come across this issue in depth, potencies of emergence of nationalistic music lie within the clash of these, at first glance, two opposing paradigms of Bardanashvili's, and Bardanashvili's music is a clear example of these. The synthesis of ethnic and global, sometimes in the form of synthesis of Eastern and Western traditions, does not contradict the Georgian consciousness. On the contrary, it's characteristic of our national identity and was manifested at all times, which created a phenomenon of Georgianness. In different eras, Georgia was subject of interest of Rome, Ottomans, and Russian empires. As Georgia always faced the biggest challenges and the conditions of military invasion of different countries, it had to come into contact with different cultures. Georgia showed amazing acceptance and openness to foreign cultures, but at the same time, it maintained its national image. For example, when Byzantine chant was established in Georgia, the monophonic hymns were transformed into three-part hymns in Georgia, precisely because chants were formed under the influence of Georgian folk music, for which polyphony is a way of thinking. So we have three-part chanting in churches. All this happened because Georgian culture takes element of foreign culture into its bosom, assimilates and Georgianizes it, so that foreign becomes an organic part of ours. Otherwise, Georgian culture as an independent phenomenon would not reach the modern era, and it would be completely assimilated with other cultures. At a modern stage, the problem of synthesis of national and global, rooted and cosmopolitan, remains the actual issue as well. Composer Bardanashvili, as well as other Georgian composers, faces the challenge of navigating cultural landscapes that are simultaneously local and global at the same time. So Bardanashvili, who is always looking for ways to combine the global and the ethnic, is unique composer because his music is synthesis of roots of two ethnics, two music, Jewish and Georgian music. His words, if you take away everything that I learned in music as a foreigner, the same Bardanashvili will remain, who is in pain as Jew, but dreams as Georgian. Bardanashvili's first steps in music are connected to his native city Batumi and Tbilisi, which are distinguished by multiculturalism and cross-culturalism. His words, I was born in Batumi and lived for a long time in Tbilisi, where the most different cultures intersected: Russian, Jewish, Gypsy, Armenian, Kurdish, Azerbaijani, Turkish, Georgian. It turns out that I'm a mixture of Eastern and Western. Synthesis of ethnic and global in his music is caused by influence of stylistically diverse environment of Israel. After the composer moved to Israel, where he brought the signs of Georgian national culture into colorful cultural space of Israel. To the extent that Bardanashvili is a representative of two cultures, let's first determine what the concept of nationalism means for him and which ethnic music expresses his identity. His concept of nationalism and compositional thinking is based on the principles of and aesthetics of both Orthodox Georgian chant, Georgian folk, and archaic spirit of multi-layered Jewish synagogue traditions that are a reservoir of his identity. He does not perceives it as non-static, forever determined phenomenon, and shows us how the features of ethnic music function in modern technology and the musical landscape. He preserved the nature of ethnic music and carries its potential into 21st century in a postmodern society. Integration of modern compositional techniques into nationalistic narratives is visible in his music. Thus, peculiarities of ethnic or national music in general is presented through influence of Georgian traditional church and folk music, synagogue chant, but global music is presented with influences of Renaissance, Baroque, Azerbaijani Mugam, Schoenberg, Shostakovich, Mahler music aesthetics. National and global in Bardanashvili's music can be discussed through postmodernism aesthetics as well. It's well known that bringing artistic events in one space that are epically distant in time and space is exactly manifestation of postmodernism with its stylistic pluralism. What has become typical for 21st century in terms of stylistic pluralism existed in Israel much earlier, Marina Kaptaradze. Thus, the issue of national and global intersects with postmodern eclecticism in his music. Marina Kaptaradze links this eclecticism not only to Bardanashvili's belonging to two cultures, but to the idea of foundation of State of Israel. Eclecticism was embodied in the very idea of State of Israel, which was supposed to be refuge for Jews of the whole world. Because of this, such eclecticism of cultures was observed in Israel, which is not observed in any country of the world. So a clear example of synthesis of ethnic and global musical and poetic also traditions is Bardanashvili's this cycle for soprano, countertenor, and orchestra, written 10 years ago. Due to postmodern music tendencies, cycle combines musical styles of different eras and is rich with examples of allusions. In this composition, there were revealed the idea of decadence, waiting for the end of life. You see this as its influence of Mahler, wanderings of the Jewish people, which is very organic for Jewish composer. It's not just about physical wanderlust, it's about style as well. Bardanashvili travels in different styles. In terms of musical language, the synthesis of national and global is evident. For the beginning, we should mention that influence of Mugam style observed in the cycle. According to Mugam tradition, among the soloists, the upper voice is female and the lower is male, and they sing in octaves, accompanied by Kamenchi. This feature of ethnic music activated in this cycle, composer made well suited to the specifics of modern cycle, which is close to monodrama or micro opera. First song is based on Sappho's text. The text conveys the following idea. Eros is such a great feeling that it changes human consciousness and causes great metamorphosis. The influence of Bach's vocal instrumental genres, especially Matthew Passion, is evident. The second song is based on a poem of a Jewish poet, Gabriel. The text talks about altruistic love. This verbal text content is very close to Georgian wine culture, table and toast traditions, and in music one can feel the influence of magnificence of Georgian polyphony folk table song Chakrulo, which was among 27 pieces of music sent into space by NASA in 1977 as a masterpiece of Earth folklore, Voyager Golden Record, Disc 1. So if I have opportunity, I will show examples. For example, Chakrulo. I'm sorry.
I'm afraid we
don't hear.
I'm afraid we didn't hear anything. We can see the pictures, but no sound.
Okay.
Are you sure you shared sound? You tick the box, share sound.
I can't see the share sound here, but
should we try the share screen? The icon share screen?
To share the, so do you see the screen? Do you see my screen now?
We can see your screen.
But you don't hear. Okay, if it is a problem now, I may send this presentation in attachment, and if someone is interested in these examples, then you will hear these examples. So I will go on because I can't manage with sharing the screen. How it works, because I thought that it worked, and now do you hear the next? No. Oh, okay, sorry. I have to check my computer. So the third song is based on Lorca's text. The lyrics say that lovers may not meet soon, but one day they will die for each other. This leads to allusion to Theodora and Didymus' last recitative from Handel's Theodora. And the fourth song, Love Drama, reaches apogee. This is a story of Lamos' lesbian love. So monotonous rhythm emphasizes the atmosphere of the morning mass. A lamento is given in the flute part, which is then repeated in the countertenor part and reflects the archaic spirit of synagogue chants. So in the fifth song, Lorca's text, here a person in love asks his lover, don't let their love to die. This part is based on Guillaume Cancelli's motif from movie Mimino. And another allusion is unconscious influence of Ryazanov's movie music. The bells harmonies you can exactly hear in the fifth song. So between part 5 and 6 and the interlude with 4 episodes, the composer represents the journey into Baroque music. This second episode of interlude remains out of Monteverdi's Orpheus Overture. So, and you can hear the beginning of 4th episode and the Monteverdi's Orpheus, and you will be surprised. So many coincidences. It's equal music. So, and the 4th episode of interlude creates an atmosphere of Baroque opera duets with strange harmonies in the finale. The composer wants to remind us the barriers that love serves to overcome, and it's perfect example of fusion of Baroque and modern non-tonal music of Bardanashvili. The 6th song is based on the text from Garcia Lorca again. The expectation of death is conveyed here. From an emotional and intonational point of view, illusion of Mussorgsky can be observed. Boris Godunov is also overcome with fear and full of expectations of negative future. The interlude and the 7th song are based on Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam that talks about approach to death. This part reflects the influence of a repertoire of Georgian military orchestra marches that composer listened in his native city Batumi when he was little. The 8th song uses texts of Omar Khayyam and Sappho. It's about the fact that everything will disappear one day. Here we see the influence of Georgian Aztec music, improvisation of folk instrument, Georgian flute, it's Salamuri, and also influence of Zakaria Paliashvili's opera Daisy, its overture. So this cycle is rich of allusions and evokes associations with musical styles and different eras. However, the influence of Mahler's musical ideas and philosophy should be highlighted. Bardanashvili never hides that he was Mahlerist. Mahler's influence is reflected in the Jewish vision of the world. Bardanashvili, as well as Mahler, uses non-Christian poetry about decadence. The influence of Mahler's music is reflected in the simplicity of songs, the accompaniment, and in creating the destiny and capacity of each note. In the conclusions, we should emphasize that the synthesis of traditions of European and Eastern music and poetry, as well as Jewish and Georgian artistic thinking, is perfectly embodied in Bardanashvili's cycle. Some peculiarities of the cycle indicate the influence of Georgian culture in general. For example, first, this is vocal cycle, but even his instrumental sections, as well as Bardanashvili's instrumental compositions in general, are essentially vocal. They're determined by the Georgian national consciousness, as Georgia is a country of a cappella choral polyphony in folk and church music. Second, the origin of jazz improvisations in some sections of this cycle should be also found in Gurian folk polyphony. It's in West Georgia. So he managed to fit Gurian folk with jazz. His core is very clear and light due to influence of Georgian ethnic music with its transparent texture and also Georgian national consciousness in general. The fact is that Georgian churches were built in such a place that light enters from all sides on the heel of the mountains. And fourth, in his core, everything is on the first plane level and nothing is on the background. It's also influenced by Georgian medieval two-dimensional miniatures without perspective, where everything is painted on the surface without perspective dimension. Thus, Bardanashvili's music depicts the potential of ethnic music as a reservoir of any nation's collective identity in the contemporary musical ecosystem. National is symbolized with aesthetics of Georgian folk and church chant and Jewish synagogue traditions. Global is presented with Mugam, Azerbaijani Nugam style, peculiarities of Renaissance, Baroque music, Schoenberg, Mahler, aesthetics, as well as by integration of modern compositional techniques into nationalistic narratives. However, the syntheticity of Bardanashvili's style is also a result of aesthetics of postmodernism revealed in the examples of allusions. This integration of modern compositional techniques into nationalist narratives leads to the transcendence of ethnicity. The example of his music already shows that when composer can fully express national consciousness in the language of modern era, the nationalist narrative does not contradict modern language and compositional techniques. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for musical. I have all these examples shown, but I will say now the presentation, and the audience will listen to these excerpts. I want to. Okay. Okay. I stop sharing. Okay.
Well, thank you. I must make a comment. No, there's something very fascinating about this Georgian national identity. There are many influences, many interactions with different nations, and you mentioned, of course, the Turkish, Persian, Slavic, Jewish, all of which are members of much larger ethnic and linguistic families. And in that sense, Georgia, albeit very much influenced by other nations, is actually very much isolated, being not related really to any of these surrounding nations. That's a bit unique position of, unlike, you know, Azerbaijan or Armenia or, of course, Russia or Persia or any of near countries. You seem to be rather isolated. And on the other hand, very much influenced by us. And on the third hand, let's say, very, very much aware of some aspects which are really Georgian. So, no, that makes probably the study very interesting. But of course, let's hear questions and comments from the floor.
And then I want to add something after questions.
let me some questions. Let me, okay.
Of course,
I think
those
this
listening
it's
can-
very interesting and very important subject where we have a studying the connection between other cultures, other different and contrast culture. Because if we take a Jewish tradition, it's very close tradition, and it's very jealous to the using this music in other context, other religion context. And of course, I have a question about synagogal, the music from synagogue in the works of these composers, and about the context and public reaction about using this work. If you can.
Okay. Very good question. Very good question. Thank you for your question. First time I want to mention that in Georgia, we have 27th century connection and relationship with the Jewish people. 27 centuries, imagine. 27 centuries and zero conflict with Jewish people, and very friendly always. The Bardanashvili is the only Georgian composer with Jewish origins, and so he combines this Georgian and Jewish synagogue music. And Bardanashvili was the first Soviet composer interested in Jewish music in Soviet times. And yes, the first reaction was very good, very positive, because as you know, we are very friendly people, very friendly nation, especially with Jewish people. So it was the people and the audience and the listeners met this with great positive energy. And Bardanashvili uses his synagogue music also in other his compositions, in his operas, in his chamber music, in his even instrumental music. For example, he has one composition, Zoom In, where he uses shofar. You know, this musical instrument. It's like a horn. It's a Jewish horn, shofar. So in the last verse of this composition, he uses the shofar, and also in other his compositions, even in this cycle, he too many times uses the improvisation that is like synagogue tradition. And if you listen this masterpiece, I think that this is masterpiece from beginning to the end. You will be convinced that this cycle is an ideal example of how to preserve the national spirit and consciousness, to make ethnic music always relevant, and to show the public that if ethnic music is used by talented composer, this ethnic music will always be a source of inspiration for classical music and can be adapted for all eras and all times. And if a talented composer uses folklore and modernizes it, folklore will always remain relevant, and it will not be like a dilemma. It's not dilemma for Bardanashvili. If you skillfully integrate ethnic music into classical music, this will not be a dilemma, and it will. But if you do not do it skillfully, it will turn into catastrophe. But Bardanashvili is very gifted composer. The same with religion canons. For example, if composer in every age has a right to communicate with God in the language of modern technology, in the language of contemporary world. For example, Penderecki's music, his Lucas Passion, he uses clusters, non-tonal music, new technology, modern technology, but it's very canonic composition, and he communicates with God in modern technology language. So Georgia is a very, very unique country, because we have to combine the streams of other cultures. We have to, because we always were invaded by Romans, by Greek people, by Muslim nations by Russians, and we are a very open nation to these influences, but we Georgianize everything and make it our own culture. Okay, if
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. But if I can correct understand you, you say that the composer was a first who used Jewish tradition in Soviet region. Yes, could you tell about the time for this using? Because Ukraine, a lot of composer in Ukraine who used Jewish motif theme in his music.
I meant he was the first composer who went to Batumi synagogue, because in Batumi we have two streams of Jewish music, Ashkenazi with Yiddish accent and Sephardism with other accents. So two streams of Jewish music, and it was beginning of 70s when he was interested in jazz music.
Yes,
and
I understand. Thank you so much.
And parallelly, he used synagogue music in jazz. So he make mugam jazz improvisation, and he also used Ashkenazi Yiddish accent, Ashkenazi and Yiddish accent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay.
Well, I think that would be enough for today. Thank you to all our presenters. Let's greet them with an applause. And okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.